The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle as Princess Anne stood before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the elegant sapphire necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. Today was different from her usual routine of royal duties and equestrian events. Today, she had decided to embrace a side of herself that had remained hidden for far too long, for years. The Princess Royal had been known for her practical approach to fashion and her no-nonsense attitude toward royal protocol. While other members of the family graced magazine covers and attended glamorous galas, Anne preferred the stables and her charity work. But something had shifted in recent months. Perhaps it was the constant comparisons in the press. Or maybe it was simply time for a change. Her personal stylist, Margaret, had been working with her for weeks to develop a new look that would honor her position while showcasing her natural elegance. The transformation wasn't just about clothes or makeup. It was about confidence. Anne had always possessed an inner strength that commanded respect. But now, she was ready to let her outer beauty shine just as brightly. The dress she chose was a stunning emerald silk creation that hugged her figure perfectly. The color brought out the warmth in her eyes and complemented her newly styled hair, which cascaded in soft waves rather than her typical practical updo. Diamond earrings sparkled as they caught the light, and her makeup was applied with a subtle touch that enhanced her natural features, without appearing overdone as she made her final preparations. Anne reflected on the upcoming celebration. Queen Camilla had planned an elaborate garden party to commemorate her recent patronage of several arts organizations. The event would be attended by celebrities, dignitaries, and members of high society. It was meant to be Camilla's moment to shine as the new queen, establishing her own legacy separate from the shadows of the past. The Princess Royal had always maintained a cordial relationship with her stepmother. Though they moved in different circles within the royal family, Camilla gravitated toward literary events and cultural gatherings. While Anne focused on her sporting interests and practical, charitable work, their paths rarely crossed in ways that would create any tension or competition. However, the dynamics within the royal family had been shifting since the coronation. There was an unspoken understanding that everyone needed to find their place in this new era. Charles was establishing his reign, William was preparing for his future role, and the other family members were adjusting their positions accordingly. Anne had always been comfortable in her supporting role, but lately, she felt the urge to step more prominently into the spotlight. The irony wasn't lost on her that this transformation was happening on the day of Camilla's celebration. It hadn't been planned as any sort of statement or challenge. The timing was purely coincidental, born from months of careful planning and personal growth that had nothing to do with overshadowing anyone else's moment. As her car pulled up to the venue, Anne took a deep breath. She could already see photographers positioning themselves and guests arriving in their finest attire. The garden party was being held at one of London's most prestigious locations, with flowers in full bloom providing a picture-perfect backdrop for the festivities. Through the car window, she caught sight of Camilla greeting early arrivals near the entrance. The queen looked lovely in a powder blue ensemble with matching hat, her smile warm and welcoming as she embraced her role as hostess. There was no hint of the surprise that was about to unfold when Anne made her entrance. The driver opened her door, and Princess Anne stepped out onto the red carpet that had been laid out for the occasion. Almost immediately, she heard the distinctive sound of camera shutters clicking rapidly, followed by a noticeable hush from the crowd of onlookers who had gathered to catch glimpses of the royal guests. What happened next would be discussed in royal circles for months to come, analyzed in newspapers and dissected on social media platforms around the world. But in that moment, as Anne walked gracefully toward the entrance with her head held high and a confident smile on her face, she was simply a woman who had decided to embrace her own power and beauty. The reaction to Princess Anne's arrival was immediate and unmistakable. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as heads turned to follow her progress through the garden. The emerald dress caught the afternoon light beautifully, creating an almost ethereal glow around her figure as she moved with the poise and confidence that came from decades of royal training. Lady Margaret Thornberry, a longtime friend of the family and regular attendee at royal functions, whispered to her companion, "Is that really Princess Anne? She looks absolutely radiant." Similar comments rippled through the gathering as guests tried to process this unexpected transformation of the typically understated royal. The photographers, who had been strategically positioned to capture Queen Camilla's hosting duties, quickly redirected their attention. Their cameras followed Anne's every step, capturing her from multiple angles as she graciously acknowledged the surprised but admiring looks from fellow guests. The sound of shutters became almost constant, creating a soundtrack of professional interest that hadn't been anticipated by the event organizers. Camilla had been engaged in conversation with the director of the Royal Opera House, noticed the shift in atmosphere immediately. The crowd's attention had distinctly moved away from her carefully planned speeches and toward the far end of the garden where Anne was making her entrance. At first, she maintained her composure, continuing her discussion about upcoming performances and funding initiatives. However, as the minutes passed and more guests gravitated toward Anne, offering compliments and engaging in animated conversations about her stunning appearance, Camilla's smile began to feel somewhat forced. This was her event, her moment to cement her position as a patron of the arts and establish her own identity within the royal framework. Yet here she was, watching her stepdaughter inadvertently command the very attention she had hoped to capture. The situation became more apparent when several high-profile guests, including famous actors and renowned artists who had come specifically to meet the Queen, found themselves drawn into Anne's orbit instead. The Princess Royal handled the attention with grace, but her natural charisma and the striking, visual impact of her transformation created a magnetic effect that was impossible to ignore. James Morrison, celebrated portrait artist who had been commissioned to paint Camilla's official portrait as patron of the arts, approached Anne instead, expressing his fascination with how the light played across her features and asking if she might consider sitting for a painting. His request was overheard by several journalists, who immediately began taking notes for their society columns. The afternoon entertainment had been carefully avoided, choreographed to highlight Camilla's interests and achievements. A string quartet played classical pieces she had personally selected, and the menu featured items from restaurants she patronized. Even the flower arrangements reflected her taste for elegant but understated beauty. Yet, despite all these thoughtful details, the narrative of the day was being rewritten in real time. Social media began buzzing almost immediately as guests discreetly shared photos and observations online. The hashtags #PrincessAnne, #GlowUp, and #RoyalTransformation started trending within the first hour of the party. Fashion bloggers and royal watchers, who hadn't even attended the event, began analyzing her look and speculating about the reasons behind such a dramatic style change. Anne seemed genuinely surprised by the level of attention she was receiving. She had expected some notice of her new look, but nothing approaching this level of fascination. As she moved through the party, accepting compliments and engaging in conversations, she began to realize that her personal decision to embrace a more glamorous style had created an unintended but significant impact. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on several longtime royal observers in attendance. Here was Princess Anne, who had spent decades deflecting attention and avoiding the spotlight whenever possible, now finding herself at the center of exactly the kind of media frenzy she typically avoided. Meanwhile, Camilla, who had worked hard to cultivate positive press coverage and public acceptance, was watching her carefully planned event become overshadowed by someone else's moment. The tension in the air was subtle but unmistakable to those who knew how to read the complex dynamics of royal gatherings. While both women continued to fulfill their duties as gracious hostess and appreciative guest, there was an undercurrent of competition that hadn't existed when the day began. As the afternoon progressed, it became clear that this garden party would be remembered not for Camilla's patronage announcements or her carefully curated cultural presentations, but for the day Princess Anne stepped into the spotlight and claimed her place as one of the royal family's most compelling figures. The situation reached a critical point when renowned fashion photographer Alessandro Benedetti, who had been hired to document the event for several international magazines, approached Princess Anne with an unexpected request. He had been tasked with creating a photo spread featuring Queen Camilla as the elegant patron of arts and culture. But Anne's transformation had captured his artistic imagination completely. "Your Royal Highness," Alessandro said with barely contained excitement. "The way the light falls across your shoulders in that dress is absolutely magical. Would you consider allowing me to take a few portraits? The composition possibilities are extraordinary." His accent carried the passion that had made him one of Europe's most sought-after photographers. Anne paused. Recognizing the delicate position this request created, she glanced across the garden where Camilla was posing with members of the British Ballet Company, her powder blue dress looking elegant but somehow diminished against the vibrant backdrop of the spring garden. The contrast between the Queen's subtle styling and Anne's dramatic transformation was becoming more pronounced as the afternoon light shifted. Perhaps it would be more appropriate to focus on Queen Camilla today, Anne replied diplomatically, though her response was overheard by several guests who immediately understood the underlying tension. This is her celebration, after all. But Alessandro persisted, his professional instincts overriding royal protocol. "With respect, Your Royal Highness, sometimes art demands we capture beauty where we find it. Your presence here today is creating something remarkable." He gestured toward the gathering crowd that had formed around Anne, their faces animated with genuine admiration and curiosity. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Victoria Pemberton, editor of one of London's most influential style magazines. She had been covering royal fashion for over 2 decades and immediately recognized the significance of what was unfolding. "Princess Anne, you look absolutely stunning," she gushed, her experienced eye taking in every detail of the ensemble. "This is such a departure from your usual style. What inspired this beautiful transformation?" Before Anne could respond, several other fashion journalists materialized, their notebooks ready and cameras discreetly positioned. The impromptu press conference that began to form around the princess royal was exactly the kind of media attention that Camilla had hoped to generate for herself and her charitable initiatives. From across the garden, Camilla watched the scene unfold with growing frustration. Her own carefully planned photo opportunities were being abandoned as photographers gravitated toward Anne's unexpected glamour. The arts patrons she had invited to showcase her new role found themselves drawn into discussions about fashion and style rather than the cultural programs she wanted to promote. Lord Pemberton, a longtime supporter of royal charities and Camilla's personal friend, attempted to redirect attention by announcing the unveiling of a new scholarship program. However, his carefully prepared remarks were delivered to a noticeably smaller audience than anticipated. As many guests remained clustered around and captivated by her transformation and the stories emerging about her style evolution, the Princess Royal found herself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. She hadn't intended to upstage anyone, least of all during an event specifically designed to celebrate Camilla's patronages. Yet every attempt to deflect attention seemed only to increase the fascination surrounding her appearance and presence. When Lady Catherine Ashworth, a prominent socialite known for her sharp observations, loudly proclaimed that Princess Anne has finally claimed her rightful place as a royal-style icon. The comment carried across the garden with devastating clarity. The implicit suggestion that Anne had been hiding her potential for years created a buzz of agreement among the assembled guests. Camilla's closest friends noticed the strain beginning to show, despite her continued smile and gracious demeanor, the careful balance she had worked so hard to maintain between acknowledging her position and avoiding accusations of seeking too much. Attention was being disrupted by circumstances beyond her control. The afternoon took another unexpected turn when celebrity chef Marcus Hamilton, who had prepared the catering for the event as a favor to Camilla, approached Anne with enthusiasm typically reserved for his most famous clients. "Your Royal Highness, you absolutely must try the lavender honey cakes. They would complement your elegance perfectly," he declared, his voice carrying the authority of someone whose opinion on style and presentation was highly valued in London society. As Marcus personally served in the delicacies he had created for Camilla's celebration, the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. The very elements that were meant to showcase the Queen's refined taste and cultural Connections were being redirected towards celebrating Anne's unexpected emergence as the day's most compelling figure. The tension that had been building throughout the afternoon was approaching a breaking point, and both women seemed to sense that the carefully maintained harmony of the royal family was about to face an unprecedented test. The defining moment came when Dame Helen Richardson, the respected chairwoman of the Arts Council and longtime family friend, made what seemed like an innocent suggestion. She approached both women as they stood on opposite sides of the garden, each surrounded by their respective admirers, and proposed a joint photograph to commemorate the successful afternoon. What a wonderful idea it would be to capture both of our distinguished royal patrons together, Dame Helen announced with the kind of enthusiasm that made refusal nearly impossible. Queen Camilla with her tireless support of literature and Princess Anne showcasing the modern face of royal elegance. It would be perfect for our annual report. The suggestion created an immediate stir among the assembled guests and photographers. Here was an opportunity to capture both women in the same frame, allowing for direct visual comparison between Camilla's understated elegance and Anne's dramatic transformation. The request seemed reasonable on the surface, but everyone present understood the potential implications. Camilla's smile remained fixed as she graciously agreed, though her closest friends could detect the slight tightening around her eyes that indicated her discomfort with the situation. She had spent months planning this event to establish her own identity and accomplishments. Yet now, she was being asked to share her moment with someone whose unexpected glamour threatened to overshadow everything she had worked to achieve, and approached the designated photo area with visible reluctance, fully aware that her presence in any joint photograph would inevitably become the focus of media attention and public discussion. Her emerald dress seemed to shimmer even more brilliantly under the professional lighting that Alessandro had quickly arranged, while Camilla's powder blue ensemble, though beautifully chosen, appeared more muted by comparison as the two women positioned themselves side by side. The contrast between them became even more pronounced. Anne's dramatic styling choices had created a visual impact that the camera loved, while Camilla's more traditional approach, though appropriate for her role, seemed less compelling in the context of this particular moment. The photographers worked quickly, understanding that they were documenting what could become a historically significant image. The clicking of shutters seemed louder than usual as multiple professionals captured the scene from various angles, each hoping to produce the definitive shot that would illustrate this unexpected turn of events. During the photo session, several guests made comments that further highlighted the situation's delicate nature. Lady Pemberton was heard saying, "It's remarkable how Princess Anne has finally let herself shine," while another prominent socialite noted that this really shows the different generations of royal style. Such observations, though perhaps well-intentioned, served to emphasize the competitive undertones that had developed throughout the afternoon. The tension reached its peak when a younger journalist, emboldened by the charged atmosphere, asked both women to comment on their contrasting approaches to royal fashion. The question was inappropriate for the venue and occasion, but it crystallized the underlying narrative that had been building throughout the day. Camilla responded with practiced diplomacy, emphasizing her belief that royal style should serve to honor the occasions and causes being supported. Her answer was measured and appropriate, focusing on the substance of royal duties rather than appearance. However, her response seemed somehow defensive in the context of the day's events. Anne chose to deflect the question entirely, redirecting attention to the important work of the arts organizations being celebrated. Her refusal to engage with the fashion-focused inquiry demonstrated her understanding of protocol, but it also left room for others to continue speculating about her motivations and intentions. The aftermath of the photo session saw the party's atmosphere shift noticeably. Conversations became more subdued as guests processed what they had witnessed. Many began making their excuses to leave earlier than originally planned. The celebration that had begun with such promise for Camilla had evolved into something entirely different. Social media activity intensified as attendees shared their observations and photos from the event. The hashtags that had started earlier in the day continued trending, but now they were joined by discussions about royal family dynamics and speculation about potential tensions between the two women. As the afternoon wound down, both Anne and Camilla maintained their gracious public demeanor. But the strain of the situation was becoming increasingly difficult to conceal. The event that was meant to celebrate Camilla's cultural patronage had inadvertently become a showcase for family tensions that neither woman had intended to create or address publicly. The evening news coverage exceeded everyone's expectations in terms of its focus and intensity. What had begun as a cultural celebration was now being analyzed as a significant moment in royal family dynamics. With fashion experts, body language specialists, and royal commentators all offering their interpretations of the afternoon's events, the BBC's royal correspondent, Sarah Mitchell, led her segment with footage of Anne's arrival, describing it as a stunning transformation that caught everyone by surprise. The camera lingered on shots of Anne moving through the garden, her confidence evident in every gesture, while Camilla appeared in the background looking somewhat overwhelmed by the unexpected shift in attention. Television analysts noted the stark visual contrast between the two women's styling choices, with fashion expert Robert Clark commenting that Princess Anne's decision to embrace such dramatic glamour represents a significant departure from her established image and creates an interesting dynamic within the current royal landscape. The joint photograph that had been taken at Dame Helen's suggestion became the centerpiece of multiple news stories. Side-by-side comparisons appeared across print and digital media, with headlines ranging from the diplomatic royal style evolution to the more provocative battle of the outfits. The emerald dress that had looked so stunning in person appeared even more striking in professional photographs. While Camilla's powder blue ensemble seemed to fade into the background, international media picked up the story with particular enthusiasm. French fashion magazines praised Anne's renaissance of personal style, while American entertainment outlets focused on the apparent competition between the two royal women. The global reach of the coverage ensured that what had been intended as a modest charity celebration was now being discussed in households around the world. Back at Windsor Castle, Anne found herself in an unprecedented position. Her private secretary, James Patterson, briefed her on the media response as she changed out of the emerald dress that had caused such a sensation. The phone in her office rang constantly as journalists, fashion magazines, and charity organizations all sought her comment on the day's events. "Your Royal Highness, there have been over 40 interview requests in the past 3 hours," James reported, with barely concealed amazement. "Vogue wants to feature you on next month's cover, and several major fashion houses have expressed interest in dressing you for upcoming engagements." Anne listened to the reports with growing concern rather than excitement. She had never sought this level of personal attention and understood better than most how such media frenzies could disrupt the careful balance that kept the royal family functioning effectively. Her transformation had been a personal decision, not a calculated move for public attention. Meanwhile, at Clarence House, Camilla was dealing with the aftermath of seeing her carefully planned event overshadowed in ways she had never anticipated. Her press secretary, Margaret Downing, attempted to put a positive spin on the coverage, focusing on the successful fundraising aspects of the garden party and the positive response to her arts patronage announcements. However, both women understood that the real story had become about something entirely different from Camilla's charitable work. The visual narrative of Anne's transformation had proven more compelling to media outlets than discussions of cultural funding and educational initiatives. The situation became more complex when King Charles called both women that evening. His conversation with Anne was brief but pointed, expressing his understanding of her personal choices, while emphasizing the importance of maintaining family harmony during public events. He had seen enough media coverage to understand that the situation required careful handling. His discussion with Camilla was longer and more nuanced. Charles had worked hard to support his wife's transition into her royal role and understood her frustration at seeing months of careful planning overshadowed by unexpected circumstances. He assured her of his continued support while acknowledging that the day's events had created a situation that would require thoughtful management. The palace communications team worked late into the night, crafting statements that would acknowledge both women's contributions to the day's success while avoiding any language that might suggest competition or conflict. The challenge was significant. How to address the obvious public interest in Anne's transformation, while maintaining Camilla's dignity and the success of her charitable initiatives. Private conversations between family members revealed the complexity of the situation. Princess Anne had genuinely not intended to create any controversy. While Queen Camilla struggled with feelings of frustration that went beyond simple annoyance at lost attention, the incident had touched on deeper issues about identity, recognition, and place within the evolving royal structure. As the night progressed and international coverage continued to expand, it became clear that this single afternoon had fundamentally altered public perception of both women and their roles within the modern monarchy. The resolution came 3 weeks later at another public engagement, this time a joint appearance at the opening of a new children's hospital wing. The palace had carefully orchestrated this event to demonstrate family unity while allowing both women to showcase their individual strengths and contributions to royal duties. Anne arrived wearing a sophisticated but more understated navy ensemble. Her styling elegant without being dramatically she had clearly learned from the garden party experience and adjusted her approach to complement, rather than compete with Camilla's presence. The emerald dress incident had taught her valuable lessons about the delicate balance required in royal appearances. Camilla chose a warm burgundy coat with subtle gold accents. Looking confident and comfortable in her role as queen, the weeks following the garden party had given her time to process the events and develop a more philosophical perspective on the unexpected turn her celebration had taken. She had also received tremendous support from Charles and other family members, reinforcing her position and importance within the royal structure. The two women's interaction at the hospital opening was notably warm and genuine. Dispelling media speculation about ongoing tensions, they worked together seamlessly during the ceremonial aspects of the visit, with Anne deferring appropriately to Camilla's senior position, while still maintaining her own distinctive presence and contribution. During their tour of the pediatric wards, the natural personalities of both women shone through in ways that reminded everyone why they were valued members of the royal family. Camilla's gentle interaction with young patients and their families demonstrated her genuine compassion and growing comfort in her public role. Anne's direct, honest communication style and obvious expertise in medical charitable work showed her deep commitment to substantive causes. The media coverage of this follow-up event was notably different in tone. Rather than focusing on fashion comparisons or competitive dynamics, journalists emphasized the complementary nature of the two women's approaches to royal duties. The narrative shifted from conflict to cooperation, highlighting how both styles could coexist effectively within the modern monarchy. Behind the scenes, the resolution had required several private conversations and a degree of mutual understanding that strengthened both relationships. Anne had acknowledged that her transformation, while personally meaningful, had inadvertently created difficulties for Camilla during what should have been her moment of recognition. She expressed genuine regret for the unintended consequences, while maintaining that her style evolution had been a personal journey rather than any kind of statement about family dynamics. Camilla, for her part, came to understand that Anne's newfound confidence and willingness to embrace glamour wasn't a challenge to her position, but rather a reflection of the Princess Royal's personal growth and changing relationship with public attention. The Queen recognized that having multiple strong, stylish women in the royal family ultimately benefited the institution rather than threatening individual positions. The garden party incident became a turning point for both women in unexpected ways. Anne discovered that she could embrace a more glamorous public image while still maintaining her authenticity and commitment to substantive work. The positive response to her transformation encouraged her to continue developing this new aspect of her public persona, though with greater awareness of timing and context. Camilla emerged from the experience with a deeper understanding of her own role and greater confidence in her position. The initial disappointment of having her event overshadowed evolved into appreciation for the resilience and adaptability required in royal life. She also gained valuable insight into managing media, tension, and public expectations. The lasting impact extended beyond the immediate family dynamics. Fashion observers noted that both women had demonstrated different but equally valid approaches to royal style, expanding the possibilities for how senior royals could present themselves. The incident sparked broader discussions about women supporting each other rather than competing. Even when circumstances might suggest rivalry, years later, the garden party transformation would be remembered not as a moment of family tension, but as the day Princess Anne fully stepped into her power while Queen Camilla had to navigate the complexities of shared royal spotlight. Both women emerged stronger and more confident in their respective roles, proving that even unexpected challenges could ultimately strengthen. Rather than divide the royal family, the emerald dress itself became an iconic piece, eventually displayed in a royal fashion exhibition that celebrated the evolution of royal style across generations. Its legacy was not one of controversy, but of transformation, courage, and the ongoing adaptation that keeps the monarchy relevant and vibrant in changing times.